Teachers, what depressing thing have you heard from a student? I'm not a teacher, but I have a younger sister. My family and I live in a rough neighborhood, so the sound of gunshots aren't rare, except this one night they were particularly close to our house and my parents woke us all up to tell us to get on the ground. While I was on the ground, my little sister was crying, and through tears she said, "If we die, do you think we'll go to heaven?" I cried so hard. She should not have to know this fear as a child. I always think about that night and the words she said, how scared we all were. It motivates me to work hard so that my family and I can live in a nice neighborhood someday. Back in my high school years, I remember this one time in math class where my teacher, Ms. Yuna, asked one of my female classmates, Trinity, to answer a question. She said she was having trouble keeping up, and Ms. Yuna replied, "How? I'm literally walking you guys through it." Trinity said, "For fuck's sake, I have issues, okay." Ms. Yuna asked, "How would your parents feel if they knew to talk to me like that?" Trinity answered, "If I could speak to the dead, I would tell you." I still remember it like it was yesterday. Being a teacher in engineering, I have a lot of students who just don't want to be there. However, one story has stuck with me. One of my students I mentored for her post-grad project was on the verge of breakdown because she hit a snag in the project and couldn't see anything to go ahead with. She was a genuinely good student and loved engineering. She told me that she felt she was good for nothing and would better be married to man and stop this useless thing she is trying to make. Her project was really good but difficult. I talked her out of it and she was successful. Not a teacher either, but I remember I was in a group project and there was this girl. She was quiet, but always stood up for herself, and she liked to draw and sing. One day, we were outside filming our project, and she started opening up about her family. She said her dad threw a chair at her and called her names. She said that her family had high expectations of her. I asked if she needed help, and I remember her saying something like, "I just tell myself that there are other people who have it worse than me." That broke my heart and it frustrated me because you should never invalidate your feelings because others have it worse. Your problems are problems and you have the right to help yourself. It also reminded me of myself because I was severely depressed the year before, and that is how I thought. So moral of the story, don't feel like your feelings don't matter, because they do, and if you need help, please get it. A pal told me a story from his teacher. Dude worked in a low-income area grade school, and they had this overweight kid behind others on studies. Kid eventually spoke up when it turned out she was pregnant. Apparently the stepfather was that kind of mental and she kept herself fat so that he grows disgusted with her. It only worked to an extent. As soon as the kid spoke up, the staff called CPS and the police. She never came back to that home. Now if you read until this point, here's another more uplifting story. The same teacher had a student who struggled with academics but desperately wanted to become a cook. So the teacher helped him look for internships and later an apprenticeship in a good restaurant so that the boy could graduate from junior high in 9th grade and go into a special trade school instead of general high school he was not interested in. If the boy graduated from that trade school, this means he might have found permanent employment as early as at 18 years of age. This also means he can later ask his employer to fund another trade diploma if the kid wants to specialize in something and the employer is on board. In my freshman year of high school, I had health class. We all had to stand up and introduce ourselves, loves, hobbies, etc. I was struggling with anxiety and depression a lot more than I am now since late elementary school. Once it was my turn, I went ahead and said my name, my hobbies, and how I would love to make friends with the class. You see, that's what I wanted to say. Instead, I was so nervous I started shaking, laughing nervously, and looked over at my only friend in that class who was a seat in front of me. "Hello, I like drawing, singing, and hope to become an animator or game designer. I would love to be friends, but you know you probably wouldn't like me anyways, which is perfectly fine." And yeah, out of all things to say, my brain said, let's tell them this. The teacher had to ask for my name and told me to sit down, and had a talk which lasted almost the whole class from there about how kids might feel this way and that it was okay, and to talk to people you trust or the counselors available at school. She also said that of course people would want to be my friend. I'm going to be a junior starting this month. I'm not a teacher, I'm just a student, but my friend said something really sad and I gave him a bag of munchies and he was excited because he never got one to himself. It broke me because I know he's not in the best situation in his household. His parents are now sort of separated, so they are struggling financially and I just feel bad, and whenever I can I'll buy him chips or a candy so he can feel a bit better. He's one of the greatest friends I've had and I hope things go well for him. So one time in elementary school I was very suicidal, and after telling my counselor about this for about a year, he called home and I had a whole breakdown while just repeating if I had not had told him none of this would happen. I was just scarred of being on medication or being sent to a Pisco ward. My teacher was forced to come and sit with me. Then my counselor called home. She had to hear my whole life story, which is a lot to handle. Also, may I point out I was a very quiet kid and had decent grades. She just got told, hey, your student is very suicidal and I need you to sit with her while I call home. She did not even care. In 5th grade, I was dealing with a lot of problems. My teacher at the time had a thing where nearly every day after devotions we would pray and say our prayer requests. Every time I told her that my dog wasn't doing so well. My family was rejecting her even after she helped us mourn the death of our other dog. They just completely discarded the gigantic impact that she made on us. My teacher prayed for my dog each time and set up a thing where you can grab a piece of colored paper and write your name on it. I explained in more detail how only me and my grandma are aware that my dog wasn't being treated correctly. My teacher supported me and I visit her and my other old teachers a lot. She made such a big difference. One kid, used to be in my class, had some issues. I think it was ADHD but was too young to know at the time. All I know is that he would get upset that his parents sold the pills that helped him concentrate. Most of the other kids picked on him because he would get destructive when really upset. They picked on me too because I was sickly. So, we hung out together and helped each other out with schoolwork. The teachers noticed he did better when paired with me, so our desks were almost always right next to each other. I got him interested in book series like Harry Potter and he would help with my math homework. Ended up leaving that school because I got sicker and couldn't go every day. He was one of the only kids there I missed. High school age now, I hear from family that still goes there that he has a baby sister and is hoping to get an English degree from the local college. Very happy to hear that he's doing something he's passionate about and that I could help back then. Not a teacher, but there is one point in my life I will never forget. When I was in school, maths was my favorite class, but I just could not pass it. My teacher tried everything, but I just couldn't grasp it. Anyways, not long after leaving school, I got myself a very much entry-level position in a bank. I worked some more. I am now a fund manager at a very prestigious investment bank at a fairly young age. I bumped into my maths teacher last year and she asked what I was doing with my life now, and I said that I'm a fund manager. She kind of giggled at first because I am the sarcastic type, so she thought this was me just being sarcastic, but I looked at her and said I'm serious. Gave her a hug and thanked her for her patience with me in her maths classes. At this point she quite literally broke down in tears. Me confused asked if she was okay. She said, you know, there's been very few times where I have felt bad for a student because they failed, but you genuinely put in the effort and just couldn't pass, which broke my heart. But to see that now you have come so far in a field that is mathematically intensive, it makes me so proud to know you refused to give up on it. I was a summer camp counselor in training when I was 16, and there's this one kid I'll never forget, Daniel. He was the most difficult kid I've ever seen. He would only talk about GTA 5 and the things he does in the game with his brother. He'd talk about how he loved picking up hookers, going to the strip club, and shooting people with rocket launchers in the game. Never in my life have I met a 5-year-old who knew the word hooker. I was appalled that he knew these terms and that he was allowed to play that game at 5 years old. To make it worse, he wouldn't sit still or participate in any of the daily activities. When anyone told him what to do, he'd say, "Fuck you and I'm gonna kill you." It was awful. I was always assigned to him because I was really good with problematic kids. Sometimes he would actually listen to me, which he wouldn't do at all for anyone else. It was incredibly difficult, but I never asked for someone else to supervise him. I felt bad for him that his parents let him play that game. Horrible parenting, and I hope he's doing alright now. He's be around 12 or 13 nowadays. When I was around 12 or 13, I went to an alternative program for kids with special needs, behavioral problems. At the end of the day, a lot of children would be picked up by what was essentially an Uber, but the government pays for it. Regularly, I would refuse to go home and sit at my desk for 2, 3, 4 hours later when everyone was gone because I didn't want to go home and deal with no food and my mom disappearing for days on drug binges. Most of the time when I did go to school, I would act up really bad and would constantly hide in the bathroom because when I was around 7 to 10, I was in an abusive school and I would hide in the washrooms for 6+ hours until the final bell rung and I could go home to my alcoholic father. I had one teacher named Mrs. Brenda Sweeney who was so good. She would come into the bathroom when I was hiding and just sit on the floor with me for upwards of an hour at a time. Talk to me and stuff. She saw me tie my shoelaces around my neck to try and strangle myself and was basically climbing over the stalls to stop me. I would stay with her during recess when the children would go outside and help her pick some music for mindfulness time, where the kids would sit in the dark for about 20 minutes to calm down after recess, since a lot of the others had ADHD or other problems and it was hard for them to wind down. I went to class one day with a razor blade in my hands and started slicing the tips of my fingers, and she would stay with me and talk to me to try and help me out. She was a really good teacher and I'm still kind of in touch with her. Haven't spoken in a while though.